Welcome to Optimize Your Endurance Riding with the Sweaty Equestrian. Personal trainer and endurance rider Tamara Basinger is here to help you ride stronger in a day and longer in your life.
Hey all, Tamara here from the Sweaty Equestrian. Today we're talking about starting a new horse with endurance in mind. Now, if you follow the Sweaty Equestrian on Facebook, then you already know that I have been thinking about this a lot lately because I am starting a 5-year-old prospect. He's just barely under saddle, and I am wanting to set him up for success as an endurance horse. And I have a long list of things that I want to make sure that he already understands before we go to his first ride. And I'm working on those now, even before I get on his back very much. Now, this is something that applies to any prospect, whether it's a horse that's well started under saddle or a young horse. Maybe even this is a good way for you to look for holes in your experienced endurance horse's training. There are a lot of things that you can do at home during the off season when your horse is injured, just all the times when you're not at a ride to make your experience better for yourself and your horse when you do get to a ride. So like I said, this is a long list. I do have a checklist that you can download if you like. I'll put a link in the show notes, but you can also just go to thesweatyequestrian.com/preparation and get that free list. So are you ready? Let's dive in. What I'm doing with my young horse, his name is Pirate, is teaching him all the things that he needs to know to be a solid endurance horse. And one of those things that's key to his success is eating all the food. I want him to be familiar with all different kinds of feeds, supplements that I might want to give him later, textures of feed. So I'm throwing all sorts of different things at him now. One of the things I'm making sure that he knows is that eating wet food is okay. You know, a lot of horses get turned off by mashes at first. I feed them to him warm. I feed them to him cold. I feed wetter mashes. I feed drier mashes. And I make them out of different things. Now, usually I just use the feed that he actually needs these days, and I just do it wetter, drier, whatever. But I also make sure to introduce things that might be novel or weird to a horse that hasn't had them before. Soaked beet pulp is a classic example. Now, Pirate happened to love beet pulp the first time I gave it to him, but I've had plenty of other horses who turn up their noses to it until I introduce it more gradually, maybe with rice bran mixed in, or their more familiar feed, and then gradually increasing the ratio of beet pulp until they decide that, oh, this is pretty good after all. So that's one thing I'm doing, feeding mashes of various varieties. Another thing that I'm doing is giving him different kinds of fats, because later down the road, when he is in endurance competition, especially when we're looking at doing 100-mile rides, he's going to be on a high-fat diet. And horses don't always find all the fats super palatable right off the bat. So I'm building those into his diet now so that he's used to eating fats. In particular, I want him to be able to consume quite a bit of rice bran and or ground flax and or fish oil. The product I'm using is the EO3 by Kentucky Equine Research. It smells to me like bubble gum, and in my experience, some horses will eat it right away, but they won't all. And Pirate was one of the ones who did not like it. He would turn up his nose if I put the full serving size in there. I had to scale it way back to just a tiny drop at first, and over about 3 weeks, I've worked him up to the regular dose. And even though he doesn't really need that right now, he's not doing enough work that he really needs the anti-inflammatory benefits or just the calories from that fat, I'm still giving him full doses for a while until he's really got it in his head that this is food, this is good to eat, so that when I do have to give it to him later, he doesn't shut that down. Another thing that I do is add salt, sometimes quite a bit of salt, because again, down the road, he's going to be needing to replace electrolytes during rides, between rides, if we're working very hard. So I will salt his feed and let him get used to eating something saltier. Now, he doesn't need all that much salt right now, so I'm not necessarily using tons and tons of salt every day, but sometimes I'll mix a teaspoon in there and he's gotten to where he will accept that. He will eat that. Also, different hays, of course. Most horses are fine with this, but trying some different things in addition to your regular grass hay and some alfalfa. Do they like teff? Do they like orchard grass? Do they like timothy? What kind of smorgasbord is going to be appealing to him down the road at an endurance ride when maybe he's a little bit hard to get eating? You can try these different things and start to get to know his preferences. And finally, treats. I've had a number of endurance horses that were ranch raised, and they don't know what carrots are. They don't know what apples are. They don't know what those little prepackaged treats are, and it takes them a while to get to where they like those. Pirate still won't eat carrots. He'll eat an apple grudgingly. Now, why do I care? It's not because I necessarily give my horses a lot of treats on a daily basis, but they sure can be handy out on the endurance trail when you want to make sure that your horse is eating, or if you're in a hold and he won't really get started. And you know, if you can just get him eating, he'll probably keep eating. If he likes treats, if he likes carrots, that's a good way to get him started, but he has to like the carrots first. So we're working on what kind of treats can I get Pirate to enjoy that he just doesn't know he likes yet. Next up, drinking salted water. This is on my list. I have not actually started doing this yet with Pirate, but I will quite soon as we start working in the summertime and doing long training sessions where it's going to be hot out. He's going to get sweaty. He's going to get thirsty. I will be offering him salted or electrolyted water before he's offered plain water. Now, this is an idea that I got from Dr. Susan Garlinghouse when she spoke at the Pacific Northwest Endurance Rides Conference this spring. She was talking about how horses will drink more if they drink salted water first and then are offered plain water. So this is a great thing for me to teach Pirate to do early on. In fact, I'm going to use a bucket of a particular color. I have one pink bucket, and the pink bucket is going to be the electrolyte or saltwater bucket. And according to Dr. Garlinghouse, her horses will learn to go to that bucket and they will drink that because they know it makes them feel good. So I want to teach Pirate that too, and I'll be giving that a try. Next up, still on the subject of eating and drinking, I want to make sure that my endurance prospect will eat and drink in unfamiliar places, and this includes drinking natural water. So if this means out on some conditioning rides when we get to that point that I bring some feed with me and we stop somewhere and I get off and we just hang out until he gives up on the distraction and eats. If this means that I haul him to endurance rides where we're not actually competing, I may not even ride at all, but I'm just taking him there so that he can settle into that environment and learn to eat and drink. That's going to pay dividends in the long run. So we're going to eat and drink in unfamiliar places, including natural water. Also, shifting to things he needs to be able to do under saddle. Of course, this is important for all horses, but especially for endurance horses. We want them to be able to handle strange noises and movement from a rider. A lot of times you're going to be out there on a loop and the day's heating up. You want to take your jacket off. Well, you don't want to scare your horse when you take your jacket off. So let's get him used to things like taking jackets on and off, tying them on the saddle, flapping those around over his head. Also, how many times have you dropped your phone or your water bottle from the saddle? Make sure that you can drop items without scaring your horse. Things like zippers and Velcro, we've got these on our saddlebags and on our gear. I want to make sure that Pirate, who is kind of a jumpy, overreactive sort of guy, I don't want him to jump out of his skin the first time I rip open some Velcro up there. So we are already practicing that. Even if I'm not on his back while I'm doing it, I'll stand on the mounting block and rip that Velcro, move those zippers, flap that jacket, get him used to all those things happening up there above him so that he doesn't dump me when I do it in real life. Other things that I've had horses jump at that I'm training Pirate to be used to, the sloshing of a water bottle or the sound it makes when you sip on it, food wrappers, opening that granola bar or whatever, the crinkly things. Also just strange noises that we riders make. Sometimes we snort with laughter or we shout. Get the horse used to that. Our phone ringers. And also things that dangle and move on the saddle, like the sponge and leash. This is something I've been doing with Pirate lately because he is such a sensitive guy and he jumps so high when something touches his ribs and he doesn't expect it. I've been working him just through his regular training, but saddled with the sponge and sponge leash tied on there on the front and the back on both sides, going in both directions, so that he can get used to, that thing might fly up and bump him at any time, and it's okay. Another one is the rump rug. If you ever use a rump rug, or if you ever think you might, be sure that your horse is accustomed to that flapping around back there. Speaking of things flapping around, I want my horse to be handled in all kinds of conditions, including wind. Now, you guys know by now that I hate wind. Wind is my least favorite weather condition. I'd rather ride in the rain. But a lot of times out here in the West, it is very windy at a ride. I remember one in particular, I think it was the Owyhee Tough Sucker ride in the springtime out in the Owyhees here. And I almost got blown off my horse. It was so strong that he actually got knocked sideways. This was my old 100-mile campaigner, Jamazon. And I remember thinking I would never have come out and done a conditioning ride in this weather. Now, fortunately, he was a pretty solid-minded guy, and he didn't give me any trouble with it. But a more sensitive horse like Pirate, I want to make real sure that he's used to being handled in the wind. And the way I do that is just do my usual training, even if it's windy, even if I don't like it. And my rules for that are: my expectations for you, Pirate, are the same regardless of the wind and the flapping things and the noise and whatever. But also your expectations of me can be the same, which is I may ask you to take on a challenge. I may ask you to come right up to your limit, but I'm not going to push you past your limit. I'm going to help you past your limit to a new level of tolerance. So we learn to trust each other in these kinds of situations. And then when they come up in real life, when we're committed to being out there on an endurance ride, or we're already out on a long conditioning ride and a storm comes up, we have confidence that we can get through this together. Also, other weather conditions, of course, we want to make sure the horse is prepared to handle precipitation, rain, hail, hot weather, And then other kinds of conditions too. Can he handle traffic? What happens if the trail goes near a freeway or a highway where semis are going by and it's loud? What if there are ATVs? Can he handle that? What if you go through crowded places? Some horses just have never seen even a crowded ride camp, let alone a trail that maybe skirts through part of a town. So how am I exposing him to all these kinds of things so that it's really not a big deal when it's a higher stakes situation?
Hey, rider! Whether you're 35 or 65, coming back from an injury or chasing top tens, your fitness directly impacts both your horse's success and your ability to stay in the saddle for decades to come. But what exercises actually work? How will you make the time? And who is going to keep you motivated? The Sweaty Equestrian membership is here to help you go the distance. Get all the support you need with comprehensive fitness programs designed specifically for endurance riders, plus a crew of fellow riders to train alongside you. Learn how to become a member at thesweatyequestrian.com/fitness. That's thesweatyequestrian.com/fitness. Your crew is waiting for you.
Another thing I'll be teaching Pirate is how to respect restraint. Now, he already ties really well, and that is super important because you never know when you're going to have to tie your horse out on the trail. It's super convenient, of course, to be able to tie him to the trailer. If you have a high tie, obviously, he's not going to be safe if he's not accustomed to that. I also want all my horses to respect corral panels, and especially if I'm using electric tape corrals, which I personally don't use. I don't feel safe with it. I like to use a good, solid, real panel that's lightweight but full-sized. But I want my horse to understand tape just in case. I mean, worst case scenario, what if my horse is loose in camp and he's coming across another horse that is in a electric tape corral? I want to make sure that he knows the rules and we don't cross that thing. So that is something that is really worth practicing at home, and then at a ride, maybe that you're not riding at, just a low pressure situation where you can keep an eye on things and make sure that your horse really, really understands and respects restraint. Also, I need to make sure that my horse is going to behave around other horses. I want him to be able to leave and be left by his buddy without losing his mind. We all know that this is easier for some horses than others. Personally, I cannot stand it when I leave a horse in camp and it just will not settle. It's hollering and pawing and running around. I feel like it's pretty challenging for my neighbors who are still back in camp to deal with. It's not good for the surrounding horses because it's harder for them to relax when another horse is flipping out next to them. And obviously, it's not good for my own horse that is undergoing that much stress. So I do a lot of taking my horses away from each other, and some handle it better than others. You know, it's not magic, but it is experience. You know, we go out and we leave the other horse, we take the other horse away and leave the one that we're working on behind, whatever it takes to get over that hump as well as possible. Now, I have had horses that I could not get past this, to be perfectly honest. I've even sold a horse because she was really bad and I just couldn't get her past this. But I'm going to do my very best to set Pirate up to just not have this issue by taking him away and leaving him behind at every opportunity, starting now when we're still months out from him doing an endurance ride. Also, something that is important for Pirate in particular is respecting the handler when he's attracted to other horses. He's a gelding, but he can be quite steady. So I'm really having to get after him when I lead him past my mare and he wants to make sweet talk at her. That is not a behavior that I want him doing on the trail or in hand or in camp. We just want to nip that one right in the bud. Also, Pirate is the kind of horse who is top dog in the pasture, and he needs to be crystal clear that when he is being handled by me, I am in charge. He is not. Absolutely no pushy or aggressive behaviors toward other horses are allowed. None, zero. Um, there's another side of this. A lot of horses tend to be frightened by other horses, especially if they have horses coming up behind them. So I want to make sure that not only does my horse behave around other horses, he can leave or be left by his buddy. He has no aggression, but also that he's not afraid, that he's accustomed to leading other horses, being passed by other horses, following other horses. And these are things that I can practice with friends on the conditioning trail before we're ever in that more high stakes, high energy endurance ride environment. By the way, if you are interested in what this kind of training looks like on a day-to-day basis, things that I do to get an endurance horse ready, whether it's an experienced horse at higher level conditioning or a new horse like Pirate that I'm just barely bringing into training for the sport. I have just started something that I'm calling Diary of an Endurance Rider. It's a subscriber-only podcast that is raw, uncut, just me thinking out loud about what I'm doing with my endurance horses and why. And, there's a little just life in general in there. Like I said, it's just a really raw voice diary of my life with the horses. And I created this because there are so many questions about the minutia. We can write articles and read articles all day long about the bigger pieces, but what does it really look like day to day on the ground? So that's what this is. It's just a diary of my thoughts about being an endurance rider and having these endurance horses and trying to do what's best for them. And at the same time, it gives you a way that you can support all the free work that I do for the Sweaty Equestrian. I spend hours and hours every week writing the articles and creating blog posts and podcasts and that kind of thing. So if you want to contribute to the cost of producing this and also get something in return, it's $5 a month. You can sign up for it. I'll put a link in the show notes, and only subscribers will have access to that Diary of an Endurance Rider. So if that interests you, like I said, it's $5 a month. Link in the show notes. I would love to have you listen in on the day-to-day of my life as an endurance rider. So anyway, other things that I'm doing with Pirate is I need him to get used to being handled by strangers. He's pretty attached to me and comfortable with me and maybe one other person. But I want to make sure that before I hand him over to a vet or have a pulser walk up and get really close and stick something in his armpit, he is accustomed to being handled by strangers. I want strangers to be able to pick up his feet, lift his tail, listen to his heart rate, listen to his gut sounds, look in his mouth, all the things that a vet would do. He needs to not be afraid of that. So to make that happen, I can recruit my friends to do those things with him. Even Mr. Sweaty can just be, he's not really a horse person, but he can just be a quote unquote stranger to do silly things like drag a hose past or run by or just come up and pet him, things that people do with horses. Also, I want my horse to be accustomed to things like sponging, like with water, and hoof handling, including on the trail, by the way. I want to be able to get off on a conditioning ride and pick up my horse's hind foot. What if I lose a boot out there and I need to put a boot on him? Is he going to be spinning around me at 1,000 miles an hour? Or does he know that, even though I just have him by a stretched out rein in one arm and I'm leaning awkwardly to get his hind foot, that he still needs to stand for me so we can get the job done and move on down the trail. Also, speaking of being off on the trail, I want to be darn sure that my horse will stand still for mounting. This is something that a lot of endurance riders gloss over, and it drives me nuts when I want to get on a horse and it's already moving down the trail. I am sure you have experienced this. It's especially fun when you're already tired. You're 75 miles deep into the ride. and you got to get off and get a gate, and your horse is dragging you down the trail before you even have your leg over his back. If you can train your horse to stand still for mounting, it is worth no matter how long it takes. This involves training him to stand next to anything, so that you can use it as a mounting block, but also hopefully you have the fitness and mobility to be able to mount him from the ground, and he should stand for that too. If you are struggling with the ability to mount from the ground, by the way, that's something that I help you work on inside the Sweaty Equestrian membership. We work on both the strength piece and the mobility piece that's necessary for that, because I really believe it's important to being able to ride competitively and safely, because there's not always something out there to stand on and use as a mounting block. So let's get that nailed. Anyway, another thing your horse needs to be able to do is trailer load, including in different styles of trailers: step up, ramp, straight load, slant, stock, all the things. As much as you can, borrow somebody else's trailer and just load your horse in and out of there. This includes loading alone and loading with other horses that maybe he doesn't know very well. Why is this so important? Well, obviously there's the convenience factor. It's no fun to have to try to, spend an hour getting your horse in the trailer every time you want to go to a ride or come back from a ride. But also, it's a safety issue for him. You may get pulled at an out check, and your horse is going to have to get in the trailer, someone else's trailer, to get him back to camp. Also, of course, if you have a veterinary emergency, you got to be able to get your horse in the trailer. So the more you can work on this at home, the happier everyone's going to be later on. Another thing your horse needs to be able to do is cross water: moving water, still water, shallow water, deep water, muddy water, all the things. The more you can practice crossing water, the happier you'll be. I like to train my horses to send. Like from the ground, I want them to be able to walk out ahead of me and go where I direct them, and then turn softly and face me once they get there. I use this a lot out on endurance rides because here out west, we have lots of barbed wire gates that are barbed wire pulled tight, and you have to get it open and then drag it to the side wide enough for your horse to go through safely. And it's really, really handy to be able to hold that gate out of the way with one arm and send your horse through the gate, and then have him turn and wait for you while you close the gate behind him. There's really not a good way to get horses through these big barbed wire gates safely if you can't do that. So I like to be able to send my horse through gates. Also, for purposes of vetting and just checking soundness generally, and for BC exams, I want my horse to be really good at trotting in hand, straight out, and then turning away from me. So I'm turning into him and then trotting back in a straight line. And I want to be able to do this on a loose lead rope, so I'm not dragging him, I'm not lifting his head up. I want the vet to be able to see what's really going on with my horse. So I want him to trot out with enthusiasm on a slack lead rope, turn away from me with me on the outside, and then trot back in a straight line. I also want him to know how to trot in a circle both directions with me beside him, not on the lunge, but like you would do for a BC exam. Be able to trot in that circle with me on the outside and me on the inside, so that that's not confusing for him the first time we have to do it in front of a vet. Happens all the time. Also, he needs to tolerate syringing, because if I need to get electrolytes into him right now, that's how I'm going to have to do it. I do this by syringing the horse with something yummy like vanilla pudding or applesauce, often at home. Once in a while, of course, it's something disgusting. It's dewormer or it's electrolytes. But most of the time, a couple times a week, I'll give him a dose of something that he learns that this is actually usually tasty and something to look forward to, so that he's not craning his neck and trying to get away from me every time the syringe comes out. Finally, I like my horse to have an emotional control toolkit. I like to have a variety of solidly trained in behaviors that I can pull out when the situation is appropriate. Things like being able to bend his neck around to my stirrup, disengage the hindquarters. Those combined, of course, would be a single rein stop. But you can't always use a single rein stop safely. Maybe the horse is going too fast, or maybe you're on a narrow trail or on a hillside where a single rein stop is a bad idea. So I also want to be able to do things like collect my horse vertically. I want to be able to do half halts. I want a good solid verbal whoa, which a lot of times will actually get me out of a sticky situation. I want things that I can do to get my horse's brain back while we're still in motion. On the ground, I like to use figure eights where the horse is going out in a figure eight shape in front of me at a trot on a long rein. From the saddle, I want to be able to side pass. I want to be able to half pass. Things that I can do to get that horse thinking and yielding and get his brain back if he's starting to lose it in a situation that's either scary or just really high energy. Also, especially useful in vet checks, like when you want to get his heart rate down and he's distracted. I like to have a good head lowering cue. I want to be able to pull down gently on the halter and have my horse's head come down. I want to be able to press on his pole and have his head come down. I just want to have ways to get him to release that tension and bring that head down. Also, I like to have a trained relax cue. When my horse gets worked up and I want to tell him, "Oh, I get it. I understand. I hear you, but it's okay." I use kind of a brrr sound, just a brrr. And it can be anything, but that's what works for me because it's distinctive from anything else. And it used consistently is something that the horse associates with, oh, okay, mom is challenging me with something. Brrr, I'm nervous, but mom is here. This is what we do when we engage our brain and we work through things. And whenever we're in this situation, this brrr, it's going to be okay. I can do this. I can get curious instead of getting worked up. So that's something I use during training while I'm doing desensitizing things. And then when we run across something that I didn't plan, it's the same pattern and the horse sees it as, okay, this is an exercise in curiosity and confidence, not something that's going to eat me. So that brings me to the end of my list. I'm sure there are other things that could be added to that, but that's a lot to start with. Way more than you probably can remember if you're doing something like riding or driving or working out right now. So remember that you can download the checklist either from the show notes or from thesweatyequestrian.com/preparation. And I want to assure you that I am not saying you can never go to an endurance ride with your horse until he has all these things down 100%. Nor am I saying that anyone will fault you if some of this that you have worked on and have trained into your horse falls apart under pressure. Goodness knows I have been there. I have one horse who's extremely well trained and knows all these things, and his brain goes to hell in a handbasket at the start of an endurance ride. We're working on it. So not everything is necessarily going to stick when you get in the high pressure situation. Don't worry about that. Certainly don't worry about being judged for that. We have all been there. But just know that the more you have done ahead of time to prepare your horse and lay that foundation, the better chance you're going to have of a good experience when you do get to that first endurance ride. Hey, if you like the show, will you subscribe, rate, and review? That really helps other people find the show so they can optimize their endurance riding along with us. And remember, if you want to support and follow along with my audio diary of an endurance rider, the link is in the show notes. I'd love to have you.
Hey, if you want to get more sweaty, visit the blog at thesweatyequestrian.com. You can follow The Sweaty Equestrian on Facebook or find @SweatyEquestrian on Instagram. And remember, you have what it takes to be a full athletic partner for your horse. Saddle up strong.